The spires of the Interstellar Academy twisted toward the alien sky, their crystalline surfaces catching the light of two distant suns. Between them, spherical classrooms hovered, suspended by anti-gravity technology that had become commonplace to most species in the galaxy, but still fascinated Yvonne Cross each morning as she made her way through the grand entrance hall. Today, like every day since her arrival 3 months ago, she felt the stares. Some curious, some dismissive, some outright hostile. As the only human enrolled in the prestigious academy, Yvonne had grown accustomed to being the oddity, the fragile, unremarkable specimen among extraordinary beings. A group of avians glided overhead, their wings creating gentle currents as they conversed in melodic chirps. Near the central fountain, several reptilians with iridescent scales stretched in the artificial sunlight filtering through the dome. Two energy-based life forms, looking like swirling clouds of blue and purple light, hovered near the information terminal, exchanging data at speeds Yvonne could barely comprehend. She adjusted the strap of her bag and quickened her pace towards xenobiology, her favorite class despite, or perhaps because of, its intimidating instructor. Professor Zorik waited at his hovering podium when Yvonne slipped into the amphitheater-style classroom. The four-eyed alien stood nearly 8 feet tall, his jointed limbs moving with precise, calculated gestures as he manipulated the holographic display before him. His skin, a mottled gray-green, tensed as he noticed latecomers. Punctuality, he enunciated in the common galactic tongue, is not merely a courtesy, but a survival skill. In the void between stars, being late can mean being dead. Yvonne settled into her seat at the middle row, neither hiding at the back nor drawing attention at the front. She had learned this delicate balance during her first weeks, be present without being prominent. The human student extracted her neural tablet and set it to record, something she had been grateful for during late-night study sessions when her memory failed her. Today, Professor Zorik continued, his secondary eyes scanning the room while his primary pair remained fixed on a hologram. We begin a practical assessment, one that will test your intelligence, adaptability, and species-specific skills. A murmur rippled through the classroom. Practical assessments were rare and often challenging, designed to push each student to their biological and psychological limits. I have arranged for a special creature to be transported to our training grounds. With a 6-fingered hand, Professor Zorik expanded the hologram, revealing a magnificent 4-legged animal with metallic fur that shimmered like liquid silver. The Arvanix. The classroom erupted in gasps and whispers. Yvonne leaned forward, studying the creature's lean, powerful build, its piercing eyes that seemed to hold ancient wisdom, and the distinctive crest along its spine that rose and fell with its breathing. The Arvanix, Zorik continued, possesses hypersensitive vision that can detect movement from kilometers away. Its survival instinct is unmatched in the known galaxy. No species has successfully domesticated it. Its natural habitat spans the crystal deserts of Procyon B, where it has no natural predators. A cyborg student raised his mechanically enhanced arm. Is it dangerous, Professor? Only when cornered, Zorik replied. It prefers evasion to confrontation. But when threatened directly, its speed and defensive capabilities make it a formidable opponent. Several of my colleagues bear scars from their research expeditions. Yvonne noticed the reptilians exchanging excited glances, their pupil slits narrowing in anticipation. The predatory species often excelled in hunting exercises. The avians were whispering among themselves, likely discussing aerial strategies. Even the usually stoic energy beings seemed to pulse with heightened frequency. Your assignment, Professor Zorik announced, is to capture the Arvanix within the G9 planetary simulation zone. You may work individually or in species-aligned teams. The first to bring the creature back, unharmed, receives top marks and a commendation in your permanent record. Yvonne felt a cold weight settle in her stomach. Humans weren't known for exceptional speed, strength, or sensory abilities. What could she possibly offer in this competition? As if reading her thoughts, Krell, a reptilian with amber scales and notorious dislike for lesser species, turned to flash his rows of needle-like teeth at her. "Looks like the primitive will be observing again," he hissed just loudly enough for nearby students to hear. "Perhaps you can fetch water for the real competitors?" Yvonne maintained a neutral expression, having learned that showing weakness only encouraged such behavior. Inside, however, doubts multiplied. She hadn't come all this way, leaving Earth, and everything familiar, to be relegated to spectator status. As Professor Zorak dismissed the class with details about the assessment schedule for the following day, Yvonne lingered, watching the hologram of the Arvanics. Something about the creature's eyes, wary but intelligent, resonated with her. Perhaps being perpetually underestimated created an unexpected connection between them. "You seem concerned, Student Cross." Professor Zorka's voice startled her. She hadn't noticed him approach, his movements silent despite his size. "I'm considering my approach, Professor," she answered truthfully. All four of his eyes focused on her, an honor rarely granted to students. "Every species has its strengths, even yours." Before she could respond, he had glided away, leaving Yvonne with the cryptic encouragement and a growing determination to prove herself, not through force or technology, but through whatever uniquely human quality might serve her in this challenge. The G9 planetary simulation zone stretched before the assembled students like an alien wasteland. Black volcanic rock formations jutted from the red soil, creating a labyrinth of canyons, caves, and precarious ledges. Artificial mist clung to the lower areas, providing cover for both hunter and hunted. In the distance, a simulated sun cast harsh shadows across the landscape. Professor Zorak hovered above them on his podium, his voice amplified to reach all corners of the gathering. "The rules are simple," he announced. "No lethal weapons. No advanced containment technology. Your objective is to demonstrate intelligence, cooperation when necessary, and creative problem-solving." Yvonne stood slightly apart from the main group, observing the various approaches already forming. The reptilians, led by Krell, were applying camouflage compounds to their scales, enhancing their natural ability to blend with the environment. The avians had split into 3 scout teams, preparing to survey the terrain from above. The cyborg students huddled around crevices. The reptilians came closest, their ambush nearly successful until one overeager member moved too soon, alerting the creature. Each failure reinforced Yvonne's growing theory. Conventional hunting methods were proving counterproductive. By mid-afternoon, she had mapped the Arvanix's movement pattern in her notebook. The creature was making a wide circuit of the simulation zone, avoiding the central plane and sticking to areas with multiple escape routes. It wasn't random, it was strategic. Still playing observer, human? Krell's voice came from behind her as she crouched, examining a tuft of silver fur caught on a jagged rock. Yvonne stood slowly, facing the reptilian and his 2 companions. Their scales were dusty from hours of stalking, and their expressions betrayed growing frustration. "I'm gathering information," she replied calmly. Krell sneered. "Information without action is worthless. But I shouldn't expect more from a species that barely managed interplanetary travel before being rescued by the Arcturians." The barb stung, but Yvonne refused to show it. "Different approaches for different species," she said, stepping around them to continue her investigation. "Your approach seems to be doing nothing," Krell called after her. "Perhaps you should return to your homeworld and study creatures more your speed. I hear Earth slugs are particularly challenging." His companions hissed with laughter as Yvonne walked away, her cheeks burning but her resolve strengthening. Let them mock. She had begun to form a plan that none of them would consider, because none of them had ever been the underdog. As twilight approached, Yvonne found what she'd been searching for, a small cave, partially hidden by overgrown vegetation, with clear signs of recent occupation. Tufts of silver fir clung to the entrance, and the soft soil showed multiple sets of the distinctive 3-toed prints. The Arvanix's temporary sanctuary. Instead of entering or setting a trap, Yvonne retreated to a respectful distance. She settled behind a rock formation about 20 meters away, unpacked a ration bar, and began her wait. For the first time since the assessment began, she felt a spark of hope. Not because she expected to capture the Arvanix, but because she had begun to understand it. Over the next 2 days, Yvonne established a routine. Each morning, she would leave a small portion of her protein rations near the cave entrance, then retreat to her observation point. Each evening, she would return to find the food gone, with fresh tracks confirming the Arvanix's return. Through patience and meticulous observation, she began documenting the creature's habits. It preferred to move at dawn and dusk, when the changing light created natural visual confusion. It favored height when available, using elevated positions to survey its surroundings before descending. Most importantly, she confirmed her initial theory: the Arvanix never initiated aggression. Its few violent encounters with other students had all been defensive reactions when cornered. On the 3rd day, Yvonne noticed something concerning: a slight irregularity in the creature's gait based on tracks left in softer soil. The Arvanix was favoring its right foreleg. Had it been injured in one of the many pursuit attempts? The thought bothered her more than it should have, given the competitive nature of the assessment. That evening, instead of leaving just food, she added a small amount of healing gel from her med kit, a universal coagulant and antiseptic used throughout the galaxy for minor wounds. She placed it beside the food and retreated as usual. The next morning, both food and gel were gone. When she reported to the daily check-in required by Professor Zorak, she learned that most students were growing frustrated. Several had suffered minor injuries from failed capture attempts. The Avians had abandoned their aerial strategy entirely, as the Arvanix refused to expose itself in open areas. The cyborgs were on their 4th algorithmic approach, each previous one having failed to predict the creature's movements. "And you, Student Cross?" Professor Zorak inquired when she submitted her status. "Any progress to report?" "I'm building relationship," she said simply. One of his secondary eyes twitched, the equivalent of a raised eyebrow in his species. "Interesting approach. Continue." On the 5th day, the breakthrough came. Yvonne was sitting at her observation point, sketching the landscape in her notebook when she sensed rather than heard movement. Slowly raising her eyes, she found herself staring directly at the Arvanix, just 15 meters away. The creature was even more magnificent up close. Its fur wasn't simply silver, but contained shifting patterns of metallic hues that rippled with each breath. Its eyes, amber with vertical pupils, regarded her with unmistakable intelligence. The crest along its spine was partially raised, indicating alertness, but not the full threat display described in the briefing materials. Neither moved for several heartbeats. Yvonne deliberately kept her breathing slow and made no sudden movements. She didn't reach for her comm unit to call for backup or assistance. She simply maintained eye contact, acknowledging the Arvanix's presence and agency. After what felt like an eternity, the creature lowered its head slightly, not quite a bow, but a subtle relaxation of its posture. Then, with deliberate slowness, it approached the entrance of its cave, where today's offering of food waited. Without taking its eyes off Yvonne, it consumed the ration, then retreated into the darkness of the cave. The encounter lasted less than 2 minutes, but Yvonne's hands trembled as she recorded it in her notebook. It wasn't a capture, not even close, but it was communication. The Arvanix had chosen to reveal itself to her. It had eaten in her presence. Most importantly, it hadn't fled at the first sign of her. Progress. Over the next 2 days, these encounters lengthened. The Arvanix would emerge, observe Yvonne for a while, then approach the food. Eventually, it began to linger after eating, sometimes grooming itself, sometimes simply watching her with those intelligent amber eyes. Yvonne noticed that its limp had improved. The healing gel was working. On the 8th day of the assessment, disaster struck. Yvonne arrived at her usual observation post to find Krell and 3 other reptilians examining the cave entrance. "So this is where you've been hiding," Krell said when he noticed her approach. "Watching a hole in the ground for days. How ambitious." "I've been building trust," Yvonne replied, keeping her voice level despite the anxiety gripping her. "Please step away from there." You'll scare it. Krell laughed, a hissing sound that sent chills down her spine. That's the point, Primitive. We've set motion sensors around this entire section. When your precious Arvenix runs, we'll be tracking its every move. That's not. Yvonne began, but one of the other reptilians cut her off. Not what? Not fair. This is a competition, human. One your kind isn't equipped to win. Yvonne stepped forward, positioning herself between the reptilians and the cave entrance. I won't let you hunt it like this. It's injured. All the easier to capture, Krell replied, his pupils contracting to thin slits in anticipation. Step aside, Krell. Yvonne surprised herself with the authority in her voice. You've had 8 days to catch it your way. It didn't work. Maybe that should tell you something. For a moment, tension crackled between them. Then, a soft sound from the cave entrance drew everyone's attention. The Arvenix stood there, its crest fully extended in alarm, muscles tensed for immediate flight. Now, Krell hissed to his companions. What happened next occurred so quickly that Yvonne would struggle to recall the exact sequence later. The reptilians launched forward with their species' explosive speed. The Arvenix, despite its injury, was faster, but its escape route was blocked by 2 more reptilians emerging from hidden positions. Without conscious thought, Yvonne flung herself into the path of the nearest hunter, disrupting their coordinated attack. Stop, she shouted. You'll hurt it. Krell shoved her aside with enough force to send her sprawling. Out of the way, Primitive. The Arvenix, finding itself surrounded, backed against the rock wall, its crest vibrating in distress. For the first time, it emitted a sound, a high-pitched keening that raised the hair on Yvonne's arms. It was terrified. Anger surged through her as she scrambled back to her feet. Enough, she shouted with enough volume to momentarily freeze the reptilians in surprise. She placed herself directly between Krell and the Arvenix, arms outstretched. If you want to capture it, you'll have to go through me first. For a dangerous moment, Krell's expression suggested he was considering exactly that. His claws extended, and a venomous gland on his neck pulsed visibly. Stand down, Student Krell. The authoritative voice cut through the tension like a laser. Professor Zorika's hovering podium descended into the clearing, the instructor's 4 eyes fixed on the scene with cold assessment. Professor, Krell straightened, adopting a respectful posture. We were executing a coordinated capture strategy. I observed, Zorik replied, his secondary eyes shifting to Yvonne, who still stood protectively before the Arvenix. As I have been observing all strategies during this assessment, Yvonne became acutely aware of the Arvenix behind her. It had stopped its distress call, but remained pressed against the rock wall, watching the proceedings with wary attention. Student Cross, Zorik continued, step away from the Arvenix. Yvonne hesitated. It's injured, Professor, and frightened. I am aware of its condition. His tone softened marginally. Trust that I will not allow harm to come to it. Step aside. Reluctantly, Yvonne moved, keeping her movements slow and deliberate. She expected the Arvenix to bolt the moment its shield disappeared, but to her astonishment, it remained in place, its amber eyes darting between her and the professor. This assessment, Zorik announced to the assembled students, is hereby concluded. Krell's mouth opened in protest. But Professor, no one has captured the target. Has no one? Zorika's primary eyes fixed on Yvonne. Student Cross, would you approach the Arvenix? Her heart pounding, Yvonne turned toward the creature. It watched her with the same intelligence she had observed over their days of cautious interaction. Slowly, she extended her hand, palm down in a non-threatening gesture, and took one step forward. The Arvenix hesitated for just a moment, then closed the distance between them, pressing its head against her palm. Gasps erupted from the reptilians. Even Professor Zorika's composed facade slipped momentarily, all 4 eyes widening in genuine surprise. Assessment complete, he declared. Student Cross has achieved what none believed possible. The Arvenix has chosen to trust her. That can't count, Krell protested. She didn't capture it. The objective, Zorik replied coldly, was never explicitly to capture. It was to bring the Arvenix back. through patience and empathy, qualities your species might benefit from studying. Student Cross has earned the creature's voluntary cooperation, a far more valuable achievement than forced submission. As if to emphasize the point, the Arvanix pressed closer to Yvonne, its body language relaxed despite the audience. She found herself automatically stroking its crest, which now lay flat against its spine in a sign of comfort. Return to the academy. Zorik instructed the reptilians. The full assessment results will be posted by tomorrow's first bell. After a moment of tense silence, Krell and his companions departed, their postures rigid with suppressed anger. Yvonne remained with the Arvanix, still processing what had just occurred. Remarkable, Professor Zorik said when they were alone. In 30 years of teaching, I have never witnessed an Arvanix willingly approach any sentient species. I didn't force it, Yvonne explained, continuing her gentle strokes along the creature's flank. I just observed, learned, respected its space and needs. The very qualities that make your species fascinating despite your physical limitations, Zorik noted. Where others see weakness, you find alternative paths. It is why, despite your late arrival to interstellar society, humans have integrated so successfully in diplomatic corps across the galaxy. The Arvanix made a soft, purring sound, leaning against Yvonne's leg with surprising weight. She noticed its injured limb was still slightly favored. It needs medical attention, she said. The healing gel helped, but I think there might be deeper tissue damage. Zorik nodded. Our veterinary facilities are equipped to handle most xenobiological life forms. The question is whether it will allow such treatment. Yvonne considered this. If I stay with it, maybe. Then let us test the depth of the trust you've established. Zorik adjusted his hovering podium to a lower height. Can you encourage it to follow you back to the academy? Uncertain but willing to try, Yvonne took a few steps toward the exit path, maintaining eye contact with the Arvanix. Come on, she said softly, patting her thigh in a universal gesture used with Earth's domesticated animals. Let's get you fixed up. To her amazement, and clearly to Zorika's as well, the creature hesitated only briefly before following her, maintaining a close distance as they began the journey back to the academy. The walk provided time for conversation. Professor Zorik explained that the assessment had been designed with multiple acceptable outcomes. Capture through force or technology would have earned passing marks, he admitted, but I had hoped at least some students would recognize the value of understanding before acting. Most species, including my own, tend toward immediate solutions rather than patient observation. On Earth, Yvonne replied, keeping her pace slow to accommodate the Arvanix's injury. We have a saying, slow is smooth, and smooth is fast. Sometimes the direct approach isn't the most efficient in the long run. A wisdom your competitors would benefit from considering. Zorika's secondary eyes focused on the Arvanix, which had maintained perfect proximity to Yvonne throughout their walk. The bond you formed in mere days is unprecedented in our records of Arvanix behavior. It raises fascinating questions about interspecies empathy and communication. As they approached the imposing entrance to the academy, Yvonne felt a moment of concern. Would the Arvanix balk at entering such an unnatural environment? She needn't have worried. Though the creature's crest raised slightly in alertness, it remained by her side, trusting her guidance. Their arrival created a sensation. Students of all species stopped to stare at the sight of the untamable Arvanix walking calmly beside the human student. Whispers rippled through the grand hall as they made their way toward the medical wing. Zorika's wild Arvanix. The human girl? Impossible. Yvonne kept her focus on the creature beside her, maintaining a soothing contact with her hand on its flank. She felt a strange pride, not in winning the assessment, but in having earned this magnificent being's trust. The Academy's chief veterinary specialist, a medusoid with tentacle-like appendages specialized for delicate procedures, met them at the entrance to the medical facility. Extraordinary, she breathed, her voice a melodious warble. May I? Yvonne nodded, but kept her hand on the Arvanix as the doctor approached slowly. The creature tensed but allowed the tentative examination of its injured leg. Minor tendon damage, the specialist concluded. Easily treated with regenerative therapy. Will it allow sedation? Yvonne hesitated. I'm not sure. It might if I stay with it. The specialist nodded. We can arrange that. The bond you've established shouldn't be disrupted. As they prepared for the procedure, Dean Zalthus, the Academy's imposing administrator, entered the medical bay. The ancient crystalline being's faceted form caught the light as they approached. Professor Zorak informs me we have witnessed something unprecedented today. The dean's voice resonated directly in Yvonne's mind, the standard form of crystalline communication. A human student and a wild Arvanix, cooperating without restraint. Yvonne straightened respectfully. It chose to trust me, Dean Zalthus. I simply gave it reason to. The dean's crystalline surfaces shifted in what Yvonne had learned to recognize as their species' version of contemplation. After treatment, the Arvanix would typically be transferred to our research division for study. It is, after all, an exceedingly rare specimen with considerable scientific value. Yvonne felt a protectiveness surge within her. With respect, Dean, that would betray the trust it's placed in me. The Arvanix chose freedom when it could have remained hidden. It chose connection when isolation was safer. You suggest an alternative? Let it choose, Yvonne said simply. If, after healing, it wishes to remain at the Academy, with me, then that's its decision. If it wishes to return to the wild, then we should honor that choice. Dean Zalthus was silent for a long moment. Your species continues to surprise us, Student Cross. Most would prioritize research potential or personal achievement. You prioritize the creature's autonomy. Isn't that what the assessment was really about? Yvonne asked, understanding that other beings have their own perspective, their own choices. A resonant sound that approximated laughter filled her mind. Indeed, Professor Zorak designed it as such. Not all students grasp the deeper lesson. The dean's form shifted again. Very well. The Arvanix will be treated, and its future path will be its own to determine. The medical procedure went smoothly. Yvonne remained by the creature's side throughout, her presence keeping it calm even as the sedative took effect. The veterinary specialist worked efficiently, repairing the damaged tendon with regenerative compounds that would accelerate the natural healing process. It should remain inactive for at least a full cycle, the specialist advised as the Arvanix began to wake. Can you ensure it stays calm? Yvonne nodded, already planning how to rearrange her small academy quarters to accommodate her new companion. I'll stay with it. News of her success spread quickly through the academy. By evening, Yvonne had received messages of congratulation from instructors and fellow students alike. Even a few of the reptilians, though notably not Krell, had acknowledged her achievement with grudging respect. As she sat beside the recovering Arvanix in her quarters, now hastily adapted with soft bedding on the floor and special dietary provisions arranged by Professor Zorak, Yvonne reflected on the unexpected turn her academic career had taken. She had come to the Interstellar Academy hoping to prove that humans belonged among the stars despite their physical limitations. Instead, she had demonstrated something far more valuable, that empathy and patience could succeed where force failed. A soft chime announced a visitor. When Yvonne opened her door, she found Professor Zorak waiting, his hovering podium adjusted to the height of her quarter ceiling. Student Cross, he greeted her formally. I've come to inform you personally that you've received the highest marks for the assessment, along with a special commendation for innovative methodology. Thank you, Professor, she replied, stepping aside, to allow him to enter if he wished. He glided forward, all four eyes immediately finding the Arvanix, which had raised its head at the interruption but showed no signs of distress. The bond grows stronger, he observed. Already it accepts your dwelling as safe territory. Yvonne smiled, returning to sit beside the creature, which immediately pressed against her side. I think we understand each other. Both of us know what it's like to be underestimated. Insightful observation. Zorika's secondary eyes blinked in what Yvonne had come to recognize as approval. I must confess, when your application came before the admissions committee, there was significant debate. Some argued that humans lacked the physical or sensory adaptations necessary to excel here. And yet you supported my acceptance, Yvonne noted. I have lived long enough to recognize that evolution takes many paths toward success. Your species' capacity for empathy, cooperation, and creative problem-solving represents an alternative but equally valid evolutionary strategy. He gestured toward the Arvanix. This result validates that assessment. The creature, as if sensing it was the topic of conversation, raised its head proudly, the metallic fur along its crest catching the light. What happens now? Yvonne asked. With the Arvanix, I mean. As Dean Zalthus agreed, its fate remains its own choice. Once fully healed, you may escort it back to the planetary simulation zone if it wishes to return to a wild state. Or, Zorak paused, his primary eyes focusing intently on her. Should it choose to remain with you, the Academy will recognize a formal interspecies bond. Such partnerships are rare, but not unprecedented. Yvonne ran her hand along the Arvanix's flank, feeling the strong muscles beneath the silken fur. I won't make that choice for it. I expected no less, Zorak said, a note of approval clear in his voice. You have demonstrated the best qualities of your species, Student Cross. I anticipate your remaining years at the Academy will continue to challenge our preconceptions. After the professor departed, Yvonne sat in comfortable silence with her unexpected companion. Outside her window, the twin suns were setting, casting the spires of the Academy in golden light. In 3 short months, this alien place had challenged everything she thought she knew about herself and her place in the universe. Tomorrow will be interesting, she told the Arvanix softly. I suspect you'll be the center of attention for a while. The creature made a soft, purring sound, resting its head on her lap. Whether it understood her words was impossible to know, but the trust between them transcended language. It had chosen her, just as she had chosen understanding over force. In the vast expanse of the cosmos, filled with beings of incredible diversity and power, perhaps that choice, to connect rather than conquer, was humanity's greatest strength. Yvonne fell asleep with that thought, the gentle weight of the Arvanix against her side, 2 beings from different worlds finding unexpected harmony under alien stars. 3 weeks later, Yvonne stood at the edge of the G9 planetary simulation zone, the fully recovered Arvanix by her side. True to her word, she had brought it back to where their journey together had begun, offering it the freedom to choose its own path. Professor Zorak hovered nearby, observing but not interfering. He had shown particular interest in the developing bond between human and Arvanix, documenting their interactions for what would likely become a groundbreaking research paper on interspecies communication. This is where we met, Yvonne told the creature, kneeling to meet its amber eyes directly. You're healed now. If you want to stay here, you can. The Arvanix tilted its head, its intelligence evident in the thoughtful gaze. It looked toward the simulated wilderness, then back at Yvonne, its posture communicating clear indecision. The choice must be genuine, Zora commented quietly. No influence, no restraint. Yvonne nodded, fighting the lump in her throat. She had grown deeply attached to the magnificent creature, but she refused to let selfishness override its autonomy. Go if you need to, she whispered, rising to step back. The Arvanix remained motionless for a long moment, its gaze shifting between the open terrain and Yvonne. Then, with deliberate movement, it approached her, pressing its head against her hand before circling to stand firmly by her side. It appears, Professor Zorak observed, that the Arvanix has made its choice. As they walked back toward the Academy's soaring spires, Yvonne felt a profound sense of responsibility mingled with joy. The path ahead would be challenging, reconciling a wild creature's needs with Academy life, navigating the continued curiosity and sometimes skepticism of her peers, balancing her studies with her new bond. But as the Arvanix matched its pace perfectly to hers, their shadows merging in the light of the twin suns, Yvonne knew that they were forging something unprecedented, a bridge between species built on mutual respect rather than dominance. I believe, Professor Zora commented as they approached the Academy's grand entrance, that you have initiated what may become a significant chapter in interspecies relations, Student Cross. I just treated it with kindness, Yvonne replied, watching as the Arvanix's ears swiveled toward each new sound, alert but no longer fearful in the Academy environment. Precisely, Zorika's 4 eyes blinked in sequence, his species' equivalent of thoughtful contemplation. A simple approach that most consider too time-consuming or insufficiently impressive. Yet the results speak for themselves. Inside the grand hall, students parted to create a path for them. Yvonne noticed the reactions had shifted since their first appearance, from shock and disbelief to curiosity and something approaching respect. Several students nodded acknowledgement as she passed, including a few who had previously ignored her existence entirely. Krell and his companions stood near the central fountain, their expressions unreadable through reptilian features, but their body language tense. As Yvonne and the Arvanix approached, she steeled herself for another confrontation. To her surprise, Krell stepped forward with formal rigidity. Student Cross, he addressed her with precise enunciation. Your approach to the assessment was effective. Coming from a reptilian, this reluctant acknowledgement was tantamount to effusive praise. Yvonne inclined her head. Different species, different strengths, she replied diplomatically. Krell's vertical pupils narrowed slightly. The Zoological Institute on my homeworld would pay considerable sums to study an Arvanix. Should you ever wish to arrange such an opportunity? The Arvanix pressed closer to Yvonne's side, and she placed a protective hand on its flank. Thank you for the information, she said neutrally, but any such decisions would be made according to his preferences, not mine. Is? Zorik inquired as they continued walking. Yvonne shrugged slightly. It feels right. Better than it anyway. A personalization consistent with your species' tendency toward emotional connection, the professor observed without judgment. Have you considered a designation for him? The question caught Yvonne off guard. She had been so focused on building trust and ensuring the Arvanix's well-being that naming him hadn't crossed her mind. I'll have to think about it, she replied. It should be something that honors his nature. A wise consideration. Zorika's hovering podium adjusted height as they reached the narrower corridor leading to the student residences. The faculty meeting tomorrow will discuss the official recognition of your interspecies bond. Traditionally, such partnerships confer certain privileges and responsibilities. Responsibilities I understand, Yvonne said, but privileges? Modified accommodations, for one, Zorik explained. Your current quarters are inadequate for 2 beings. Additionally, you will be granted access to specialized training facilities and resources to nurture the bond's development. As they reached her door, Yvonne felt a surge of gratitude toward the professor whose challenging assessment had changed the course of her academic career. Thank you for designing a test that allowed for multiple solutions, she said. Many wouldn't have seen beyond the obvious approach. All 4 of Zorika's eyes focused on her, a rare gesture of complete attention. The Academy exists to cultivate excellence in all its forms, Student Cross. Sometimes excellence manifests in unexpected ways. With a slight incline of his elongated head, he added, Rest well. I suspect your Academy experience will be considerably different henceforth. That prediction proved accurate. Within days, Yvonne and the Arvanix were relocated to larger quarters on the eastern wing, featuring an adjoining outdoor enclosure where the creature could experience natural light and open space. Fellow students who had previously ignored her now sought her out, curious about her methods, and the developing bond with the creature they had been taught was untamable. Even the instructors treated her with newfound interest, occasionally asking her to demonstrate communication techniques with the Arvanix during xenobiology lectures. Professor Zorik, in particular, had become something of a mentor, providing additional resources and guidance as she navigated her unique situation. The name came to her after watching the Arvanix stand silhouetted against the sunrise, his metallic fur catching the early light in a display of silver and gold. Helios, she said, and his ears immediately pivoted toward her, amber eyes meeting hers with what she could only interpret as approval. Helios adapted to Academy life with surprising ease. His intelligence proved exceptional even by Arvanic standards. He quickly learned the layout of permitted areas, understood basic verbal commands, and demonstrated an uncanny ability to sense Yvonne's emotional state. When she struggled with particularly challenging coursework, he would rest his head on her lap, providing silent companionship until her frustration subsided. Their routine developed naturally. Mornings began with exercise in the enclosure, followed by classes where Helios would lie quietly beside her desk, alert but unobtrusive. Afternoons often included specialized training sessions where they worked on communication signals and bonding exercises under Professor Zorka's guidance. His neurological activity during your interactions is fascinating, the professor remarked one day, reviewing holographic brain scans. These patterns here, he indicated swirling colors in the frontal region, suggest cognitive processes typically associated with social recognition in much more communal species. The Arvanics were believed to be strictly solitary. Perhaps they're solitary by circumstance rather than preference, Yvonne suggested, scratching behind Helios's ears as he pressed against her leg. If they're rarely approached without hostility, solitude might be a survival adaptation rather than a natural state. Zorka's secondary eyes blinked rapidly, a sign of intense interest. A hypothesis worth exploring. It would explain the speed with which he formed attachment to you. As weeks turned into months, Yvonne's unique position at the Academy evolved from novelty to established reality. The initial skepticism faded as Helios's continued presence demonstrated the sustainability of their bond. She found herself becoming a reluctant authority on interspecies communication, with students from various departments seeking her perspective on their research. Even Krell had moderated his hostility, though their interactions remained formal rather than friendly. During a collaborative assignment in advanced planetary ecology, he had even contributed constructively to their shared project, acknowledging Yvonne's insights without the dismissive comments that had once been his standard response. Your understanding of adaptive behaviors is adequate, he conceded after she identified a pattern in migration data that had eluded the others. Coming from him, it was practically a standing ovation. The true test of their bond came unexpectedly during Yvonne's second year at the Academy. The routine request from the Interstellar Zoological Authority arrived without warning. A formal application to study Helios for a 3-month period at their primary research facility. They cannot compel his participation, Dean Zalthus assured her during the meeting called to discuss the request. The interspecies bond is protected under galactic charter regulations. However, the crystalline administrator added, resonant thoughts conveying concern. Refusal could affect future research opportunities for both of you. Yvonne glanced at Professor Zorik, who had been uncharacteristically quiet during the discussion. What's your assessment, Professor? The IZA maintains the highest ethical standards, he replied carefully. Their research would not involve invasive procedures. However, separation from you would undoubtedly cause Helios significant stress. Then it's not happening, Yvonne stated firmly, feeling Helios press against her leg beneath the conference table. I won't subject him to 3 months of anxiety just to advance someone's research agenda. Perhaps, Zorik suggested, a compromise could be arranged. You could accompany Helios to the facility, participating as research partners rather than subject and guardian. Your coursework could continue remotely, and the experience would provide valuable practical application of your studies. The idea had merit, Yvonne had to admit. It would allow the research to proceed without compromising Helios's well-being, and the practical experience would enhance her education. After extensive negotiation, a modified arrangement was approved, a 6-week research collaboration with the IZ, with Yvonne participating as an equal partner in the study of Arvanic's behavior and cognition. The journey to the research facility on Proxima Centauri's second moon marked Helios's first experience with interstellar travel. Yvonne had worried about his reaction to the confined space and unfamiliar sensations, but he remained calm, staying close to her throughout the 3-day voyage. The Arvanix's legendary adaptability, it seemed, extended to starship environments when supported by the security of their bond. The IZA facility impressed even by galactic standards. A sprawling complex of interconnected biodomes replicating various planetary environments, staffed by the foremost xenobiologists in known space. Dr. Ilara Katri, the human director of cognitive research, greeted them personally upon arrival. "Student Cross," she said warmly, extending her hand in the human custom that had become increasingly rare as Earth's representatives adapted to more diverse galactic greeting protocols. "Your work with Helios has become something of a legend in our field. I'm honored to host you both." Yvonne accepted the handshake, appreciating the familiar gesture after months surrounded by alien customs. "Thank you for accommodating our requirements, Dr. Katri. I hope our participation proves valuable." "I have no doubt it will," Katri replied, kneeling to observe Helios, who maintained a polite distance while assessing the new human. "Magnificent." The Holar Accords hardly do him justice. The research program proved more engaging than Yvonne had anticipated. Rather than treating Helios as a passive subject, Dr. Katri and her team incorporated both Yvonne and the Arvanix as active participants in designing and implementing cognitive tests. The exercises, ranging from spatial puzzles to communication challenges, revealed aspects of Helios's intelligence that even Yvonne hadn't fully appreciated. His problem-solving approach suggests abstract reasoning capabilities comparable to advanced primates, Dr. Katri noted during their third week of testing. But it's his empathic response that's truly unprecedented. Watch how he adapts his behavior based on your emotional cues. The demonstration that followed involved Yvonne feigning different emotional states: anxiety, excitement, sadness, while Helios navigated a simple maze. His performance changed dramatically with each shift, becoming more cautious when she projected worry, more exploratory when she expressed curiosity. "He's not just responding to commands," Katri explained to the assembled research team. "He's incorporating her emotional state into his decision-making process." This level of interspecies empathy challenges everything we thought we knew about solitary predator cognition. Throughout their stay, Yvonne continued her academy coursework remotely, often studying late into the facility's night cycle, while Helios slept nearby. The dual responsibilities proved exhausting but fulfilling, especially as her practical experience with the IZA increasingly informed her theoretical understanding of xenobiology concepts. "You should consider specializing in cognitive xenobiology," Dr. Katri suggested as their research period neared its conclusion. "Your insights have been invaluable, and the field needs more researchers who understand that interspecies communication goes beyond simplistic stimulus-response paradigms." "I've been considering it," Yvonne admitted. "Professor Zorik has suggested a similar path." Katri smiled. "Zorik rarely offers career advice. When he does, it's worth heeding." The return to the academy brought new challenges and opportunities. Based on their research at the IZA, Yvonne proposed an independent study project focused on developing a more sophisticated communication system with Helios, one that might eventually serve as a model for interactions with other intelligent non-humanoid species. "The implications extend beyond academic interest," she explained during her proposal defense before the faculty committee. "As galactic exploration continues to discover sentient species with nonverbal communication methods, the protocols we develop with Helios could provide a foundation for ethical first contact scenarios." Professor Zorik, serving as her primary advisor, supported the proposal with uncharacteristic enthusiasm. "Student Cross has demonstrated exceptional aptitude for interspecies communication. Her bond with the Arvanix provides a unique opportunity to advance our understanding in this critical field." The project was approved, complete with dedicated research resources and scheduled presentations at the prestigious Interstellar Xenological Society's annual conference. What had begun as an unexpected outcome of classroom assessment had evolved into a pioneering research initiative with potential galaxy-wide applications. Not everyone viewed these developments positively. A vocal minority of students, primarily from traditionally competitive species like the reptilians and mantodines, questioned whether Yvonne's special accommodations and research opportunities constituted preferential treatment. The whispers rarely reached her directly, but the occasional cold glance or abruptly ended conversation in the library told her enough. You should not concern yourself with their insecurities, Professor Zorak advised when she mentioned the tension during a research consultation. Excellence often provokes discomfort in those who perceive themselves as diminished by comparison. I don't want to be divisive, Yvonne replied, watching Helios explore the holographic simulation they had created for his cognitive mapping test. We're supposed to be learning from each other's strengths. Commendable sentiment, Zorak acknowledged, but not all students share your collaborative perspective. Some view the academy as a zero-sum competition rather than a collective pursuit of knowledge. The professor's prediction of continuing opposition proved accurate, but so did his assurance that it would matter less over time. As Yvonne's research with Helios produced increasingly significant results, even the skeptics found it difficult to dismiss their contributions to the academy's scientific standing. By the beginning of her third year, Yvonne had published 2 peer-reviewed papers on Arvanix cognition and interspecies bonding, established a small but dedicated research group, including students from 5 different species, and been invited to guest lecture at 3 major universities in the Centauri system. Helios had become not just her companion, but her research partner, his intelligence and adaptability continuing to surprise even those who worked with him regularly. The breakthrough came during an experiment designed to test the limits of their symbolic communication system. Using a combination of physical gestures, vocal tones, and simple holographic images, they had established a vocabulary of nearly 300 concepts, far exceeding any previous non-technological communication with a non-humanoid species. On that particular day, they were attempting to communicate abstract concepts like future and possibility, ideas that had proven challenging to convey without language. Yvonne projected a holographic sequence showing a seed growing into a tree, accompanied by the gesture they had established for becoming. Helios watched intently, then did something unprecedented. Instead of selecting from the response options they had trained with, he used his paw to rearrange the holographic elements, creating a new sequence, the seed growing into a different plant entirely. The research team fell silent, watching in astonishment as Helios continued manipulating the hologram, creating variations of the growth pattern, each representing a different possible outcome from the same beginning. He's not just responding to the concept, whispered Tella, an avian doctoral candidate who had joined the research group the previous semester. He's expanding on it, showing multiple futures. Professor Zorak, present for this particular session, moved his hovering podium closer to the holographic display. This represents a quantum leap in demonstrated cognition, he stated, all 4 eyes focused on the Arvanix with newfound intensity. Helios is not merely processing our concepts. He is contributing to the dialogue with original thoughts. The implications of this breakthrough extended far beyond their specific research. If Helios could conceptualize and communicate abstract possibilities, then the traditional boundaries between intelligent species and advanced animals became even more arbitrary than many xenobiologists already suspected. The discovery prompted a flurry of activity, additional tests, documentation, and preparations for a major paper that would almost certainly reshape the field's understanding of non-humanoid cognition. Amid the academic excitement, Yvonne found herself reflecting on the journey that had brought them to this point. What had begun as a desperate attempt to prove herself in a competitive assessment had evolved into something far more profound, a genuine partnership with a being many had considered incapable of such connection. The irony wasn't lost on her. In trying to demonstrate human capabilities, she had instead helped reveal the unrecognized potential of another species entirely. One evening, as they sat together in their shared quarters, Helios resting his head on her lap while she reviewed research notes, Yvonne found herself wondering what the future held for them. Her graduation was approaching, bringing decisions about further education, career paths, and inevitably, where Helios would fit into those plans. "Whatever comes next," she told him, stroking the metallic fur that still caught the light in breathtaking patterns, "we'll face it together. Partners, not owner and pet." Helios raised his head, amber eyes meeting hers with that uncanny intelligence that had changed both their lives. In that moment of connection, words seemed unnecessary. They had moved beyond conventional communication into something deeper, a bond forged through patience, respect, and the simple courage to see another being as worthy of understanding rather than conquest. Outside their window, the spires of the Interstellar Academy caught the light of the setting twin suns, a reminder of how far they had both come from that first day in Professor Zorka's classroom. The journey had been unpredictable, challenging, and at times painful, but as Helios settled back against her with absolute trust, Yvonne knew she wouldn't change a single step.